So I'm continuing now with chapter 1 of the book Knit 1, Kill 2, a knitting mystery with delicious recipes and knitting patterns by Maggie Sefton. Both houses and the assorted outbuildings nearby occupied a pie-shaped wedge of land that clung to the corner of a busy intersection. Kelly remembered when both streets were country roads, cutting through fields of sugar beets and sheep farms. Now a big box discount store swallowed the opposite corner and townhouses clustered across the street. At least her aunt and uncle had sold their farmland to the city for a golf course and kept only the cottage and its yard. If she squinted her eyes hard enough, Kelly could block out the golfers and picture her uncle heading to the barn years ago when he was still alive. "Kelly, is that you?" a woman's voice called. Kelly shut the gate, knowing Carl would be occupied for hours identifying scents. She turned and recognized Mimi Schaefer walking across the driveway. Mimi owned the knitting and needlework shop that now occupied what was once Aunt Helen's and Uncle Jim's farmhouse. Her aunt had been ecstatic about the arrangement, since she was an expert knitter and quilter, but Kelly had always felt vaguely resentful. She remembered when the house was filled with Aunt Helen and Uncle Jim and memories. But Uncle Jim's long illness changed all that. Now Kelly felt nothing but gratitude. Mimi had been Aunt Helen's closest friend and had never left Kelly's side during yesterday's service. She gave names to faces and helped Kelly stand and sit through a liturgy that was no longer familiar. Kelly straightened her white blouse and navy skirt. Not as tailored as her usual CPA firm attire, but sober enough for a lawyer meeting. She couldn't wait until she could change into a casual top and slacks, maybe even shorts if it stayed warmed. Ever since she got back, she'd been dressed up and meeting people, just like the office. But Colorado meant sunshine and mountains and freedom to Kelly, and that meant shorts, a t-shirt and sneakers. She brushed her chin-length dark brown hair behind her ear and checked the barrette in back. Kelly rushed through her shower and dressing in order to fit in a morning run along the trail that ran beside the motel. She'd barely checked the mirror. After yesterday's tears, she needed to clear her head. Running always helped her think. She waved to Mimi. "I just thought I'd let Carl use Helen's backyard today while I go to all those, meetings, lawyer, banker, and all that." "That's a great idea. I'm sure he's tired of being cooped up in the motel room," Mimi said with a bright smile. Her sun-streaked brown hair feathered softly around her face. 50-ish, slender and pretty, she wore a powder blue straight dress that accentuated her trim figure. But what really drew Kelly's attention was the open weave vest she wore on top. The loosely fixed knots held the yarns together. Varying shades of blue traveled all the way to green and back again. The effect was stunning. "Do you have time for a cup of tea or coffee?" Mimi asked, obviously hoping for a yes. Kelly hesitated, running through her mental day timer. That and the Greenwich Meridian time clock in her head kept Kelly on task. She depended on that clock. Back in the firm, everyone kept track of the time in tenths of an hour, 6-minute intervals, billable hours. Consequently, Kelly was seldom late. "I have a few minutes. My appointment with a lawyer isn't until 10. "Oh, darn, I was hoping we'd have more time," Mimi said, her smile momentarily missing. "I've been dying to show you the shop, but I guess it'll just have to wait until later today. Why don't we step over to the cafe?" She gestured toward the pathway leading around the farmhouse. Kelly completely forgot that a bistro-style cafe had opened in the former kitchen and dining room of the farmhouse since her last visit. As they followed the flower beds and flagstone path, Kelly was astonished to see the cafe also spilled out into the shady backyard. Surrounded by high stucco walls, the entire patio was private, secluded from the outside. The whole setting was delightful and charming, Kelly had to admit. Mimi chose a table and sat down. Motioning to a nearby waitress as Kelly settled into a wrought iron chair. "This is really quite nice. I like what they've done here," Kelly surprised herself by saying. Noticing the many tables filled with customers lingering over late breakfast and brunch, she asked, How is it doing? Financially, I mean. I know how hard it is for small restaurants to make it." As a beginning accountant years ago, Kelly had had several restaurants to worry about. Shoebox clients, she used to call them, because they always kept their accounts in shoeboxes for some reason. "Actually quite well, according to Pete," said Mimi. "He's the young man who had the idea of turning this whole area into a restaurant. Somehow he managed to convince the management company that owns it to invest in used equipment, and he volunteered all the labor. He put his heart and soul into this place." She shook her head. "Let's hope all that hard work hasn't been wasted for both of us." Intrigued by the cryptic remark, Kelly was about to respond when the waitress appeared. She had shoulder-length reddish-brown hair that curved around a pretty face. "Hi, Mimi," she said with a bright smile, then turned to warm gaze to Kelly. "Kelly, this is Jennifer Stroud," Mimi introduced. She was also a friend of Helen's. "Kelly, I just wanted to say how shocked we were at Helen's death. She was a wonderful lady. I used to see her over at the shop almost every day, and she was always so sweet and loving. We'll all miss her a lot." The comments caught Kelly unprepared, and she felt her eyes grow suddenly moist. She glanced down at her napkin. "Thank you. You are very kind." Jennifer reached out and patted Kelly's arm. "Hey, that's okay. Let me bring you something. I know Mimi's order already. Earl Grey cream. How about you?" "Coffee, black and strong," Kelly said with a smile which helped chase away the tears. "Down with decaf, right?" Jennifer winked as she flipped the notepad closed. "Be right back." "I think she was at the funeral yesterday, but I really can't remember too much," Kelly said as she watched Jennifer skirt between tables, glad for the chance to compose herself. "Oh yes, she was there with the other knitting shop regulars." "Regulars?" Kelly asked. "Who are they?" "We've got lots of knitting and needlework groups that meet regularly at the shop during the week. Some are organized, some just happen, like Jennifer's group. They are a bunch of women, many of whom are around your age, who meet after work a couple of times a week or more. Of course, anybody who shows up is welcome to sit in with any group. That's how Helen met Jennifer and the others." Kelly could easily picture that. Helen was always knitting and loved nothing better than to share her passion. It was a shame Kelly had proven to be such an unwilling student. Now she was sorry. She'd always feigned impatience whenever her aunt had tried to coax her into learning to knit. "I know Aunt Helen enjoyed that," Kelly mused. She loved meeting new people, and living across from the shop, she could make new friends almost every day. Every week when I'd call her, she'd always tell me something funny she'd heard, usually from some friends. Kelly would miss those phone calls. Helen had a lot of friends, as you saw yesterday at the service. Everyone loved her, and we want to help you in whatever way we can, Kelly. Several people have offered to help you through the house when you are ready. Kelly groaned inwardly. That unpleasant chore had almost slipped her mind. Whenever it had appeared, she shoved it away. At least having people with her would make the task easier and less painful. I confess, I've deliberately not thought about that chore, she admitted. I guess I'm avoiding going into the house after, well, you know. I understand, Kelly. Thanks so much. I really appreciate your help. I remember how hard it was going through my dad's things, and I'd been prepared for his death. Mimi reached out and patted Kelly's arm. Well, you're not alone this time, Kelly. We are here to help you. Jennifer's cheerful bustle and the inviting tray of coffee and tea arrived just when Kelly felt her eyes grow moist again. After the funeral yesterday, she thought she'd cried herself dry. Apparently, there was a well inside her that ran deeper than she knew. There was no one left anymore. Her dad 3 years ago, now Aunt Helen. Her entire family was gone. The timer went off inside her head and Kelly drained the cup. Speaking of that, I have to go. Lawyers get all pinched around the edges if you're late. Oh, you'll see me later at the shop with the others. Good luck with the lawyer. Kelly hastened to her car. She'd dutiful let Mimi show off her shop, for Aunt Helen's sake, if nothing else. Kelly couldn't knit her way out of a paper bag, so all that knitting stuff would be lost on her. Her aunt had tried several times to instruct Kelly when she was growing up and even as an adult, but it never seemed to take. Kelly would fumble the needles and drop the yarn wherever it took to appear completely incompetent. There were so many more fun things to do outside on the farm, she just couldn't sit still long enough to learn. Besides, all those different stitches looked complicated to Kelly. Knitting here, purling there, all that yarn, needles busily working away, stitch after stitch, row after row, looked like a lot of work to Kelly. She just didn't have that kind of patience. The only patience she'd ever had was for numbers. Numbers stayed put on paper. They didn't fall off the end of the needles. Oh yes, Kelly thought as she backed her car out of the parking space, numbers were far less confusing than knitting.